Okay, for this lesson, we are discussing ratios. When you are talking about ratios, a ratio is just a comparison of two quantities using division. You'll see a ratio written in three different ways. I'm just going to use this 4 to 2 feet. So the easiest way to write a ratio is 4 to 2, like this. But sometimes you'll see it written 4 to 2. And the last way you'll see it written is 4 to 2. This is the way I want you to think of it in your brain, because when you're dealing with ratios, you can simplify them to a rate. A unit rate is when you simplify a ratio till the bottom number, or the denominator, is over 1. So in this case, 4 over 2 would become 2 over 1. So the unit rate of this ratio would be 2. But let's go through this. Make sure you're in your math workbooks. We're on page 103. And you do need to be writing this in your journals. If you haven't already done that or turned to that page, pause this video and do so. This would be your first vocab word and its definition. I'm going to continue. All right, so looking at activity 1. This is dealing with recipes. And a lot of recipes you can double. All recipes, I don't know why I said a lot. All recipes you can either double, or sometimes you can halve them in order to make more or less. In this particular activity, you have 3 different recipes. All right, so here's your 3 recipes. This is hand lotion. They're making hand lotion. They're asking the question, do these recipes make the same lotion, and how can you tell? Well, the way to tell if you are making the same recipe is just to compare the different ingredients as ratios, because then you can decide whether or not things have been either halved or doubled or tripled or whatever. So what's the first thing we should do to decide if these are the same recipes? It may be the simplest thing, but the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that each one of these ingredients are the same ones you see over here. Because if you have different ingredients, then they're not going to be the same recipe. So, apricot oil, coconut butter, lanolin, grated beeswax. Same, and same. So now we look at the extra things we're adding. Rose water, aloe vera, rose oil, and E capsules. Vitamin E capsules. Alright, so all of the ingredients for all 3 recipes are the same. So far that's good. So now we need to compare what is in one recipe compared to the next recipe. So you're going to do this by creating ratios. I'm going to use blue, I think. So we're going to look at the first ingredient, which is a cup of apricot oil. So I'm going to say recipe 1 over recipe 2, and I'm going to say 2/3 cup over 1 cup of apricot oil. Now if I simplify this recipe, I get 2/3. Or I'm sorry, this ratio, I get 2/3. So I'm looking to see that if all of the ingredients have a ratio reduced to 2/3. So now let's look at the second measurement. We have 1/3 cup compared to 1/2 cup. So if I were to simplify these, remember this is division technically. So I would say 1/3 divided by 1/2. Well, when you're doing fractions, remember it's 1/3 times 2 over 1. And if I multiply straight across, I get 2/3. So this recipe also simplifies to 2/3. So far recipe 1 and recipe 2 are equivalent. Okay, you need to go through and continue checking all of these. 1 to 1.5, so 1 over 1.5. So again, I'm going to divide that. 1 divided by 1.5, which is the same thing as 1 times 1.5 can be written as 3 over 2, right? So then you would flip it. 1 times 2 over 3, which equals 2 over 3. So there's another measurement. So that's our third. The lanolin is also 2/3. So you need to keep going, writing them into ratios, and then simplifying the ratios to see if they each become 2/3. And you do this for all the ingredients. You can just do this around on the page, down at the bottom, wherever you have space, or you can have a separate piece of paper, whichever works for you. So you're going to be continuing to go through that, finding all these ratios. Once you have tested all of them, you will tell me whether recipe 1 and recipe 2 are equivalent. So I want a statement at the end saying recipe 1 and recipe 2 are equivalent or are not equivalent. And then same with 2 and 3. So you're going to have to check these ratios as well. Okay, so that's your first activity. And then your next activity, and if you want to pause me and finish this activity and then come back to the lecture, that is totally fine. That way you don't lose your place. I'm going to move on to the next activity. All right, so this is activity 2, and it does say work with a partner. Some of these will, and I know we're in isolation, but if your parent wants to help you, or if you have a sibling that wants to help you, I'm fine with that. But you are all capable of doing this without a partner if you don't want to bother. That's fine. So it tells you the ratios 1/3, 2 6, 3 9, 4 12, 5 15ths, and 6 18ths are all equivalent. This means that all of these larger ratios can reduce down to the 1/3 ratio. So if I were to simplify all of those other ratios, they'd all simplify down to 1/3. But what they'd like you to do is to tell me, to explain how you can use this multiplication to show that they are equivalent. So you can see they've already sketched it for you. If I have when you take your initial fraction and you multiply it times 1, you get 1 over 3. So then I take my initial fraction, I'm just going to write it over here, and I multiply it times 2, and I get 2 over 6. And I multiply it times 3, I get 3 over 9, and etc. So think about how can you explain to me why this shows that these are equivalent. And just in your own words, except for I'd like you to use the words numerator and denominator. So maybe discuss with me what you're doing to the numerator and denominator to show that these fractions are all equivalent. Okay? And then we're going to use the multiplication table to find 10 more ratios that are equivalent to each of the following ratios. All right, so I'm not gonna have my multiplication chart on the screen, but you can look at it in your book. So, and if you haven't answered A, pause me and go write a little sentence for me under that multiplication table about how you can compare those. All right, for B, we have a fraction 2/7, and they want you to give me how to find 10 more ratios. Most of you can do this without using a multiplication chart because you can do the multiplying in your head, but the chart will help you if you need it. So this is 2/7. If I were to multiply 2/7 times 2, I would get 4 over 14. If I were to multiply 2/7 times 3, I would get 3 times 2 is 6, 7 times 3 is 21. Okay, you can keep going. What would be your next one? Times 4 maybe? So now let's look at 8/3. And yes, this is an improper fraction, but you can still consider it a ratio. Okay, it doesn't have to be, in fact, you can't write a ratio as a mixed number. Because let's see, 8 over 3 would be 2 and 2/3, right? This is not considered a ratio. It always has to be with one number compared to the next number. All right, so again, if I were to do this times 2, I would get 8 and 8 is 16. 3 times 2 is 6. If I were to do it times 3, 8 times 3 would be 24. And then 3 times 3 would be 9. So you can just keep going and fill out the rest of that. I trust you to finish that. Okay, you do not have to do page 105 in your journal. Is this the journal? In the workbook. So just cross that off to remind you don't have to do it. The last part you need to do is on page 106, and this is your homework assignment. The rest I was going through it with you. So think of the first 2 pages that I went through with you as your example pages, and now this is your assignment. So you're doing on workbook page 106, numbers 1 through 10. I will expect you to turn in all 3 papers, so you're going to turn in page 103, 104, and 106. You can either take a picture and upload to this Google Classroom right here, just upload it as your assignment, or you can hang on to all your papers and turn them in once a week on Tuesdays. It would make it easier if you upload them, because then I can grade them quickly, but if that's not something you can do because of lack of internet, let me know.